Hello everyone, I'm Darcy Bono, and in this video I'm going to show you a very simple technique for creating this cool marble effect. I recently posted this avatar of Cain on my social media pages. People were very excited by it and wanted to know how on earth I did this marble, and let me assure you, it is outrageously easy. It doesn't even take an airbrush. So that being said, let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is take whatever surface you intend to be marble and prime it white. We're going to be using contrast paints over top of this, so any light color will work, but for the sake of greater vibrancy, I have primed this one using white scar spray. Next, we're going to make a mixture that is essentially going to carry this entire process. This is 2 drops of Skeleton Horde contrast and 2 drops of Guilliman Flesh contrast with 3 drops of Lahmian Medium. You basically want this as a kind of heavy shade coat consistency, and you can flavor it to taste as far as color goes. If you'd like it a more rosy colored marble, put in more Guilliman Flesh. If you'd prefer a more yellow ivory marble, put in more Skeleton Horde. But either way, don't skimp on your Lahmian Medium because that will keep it nice and transparent. And then you just cover the whole white surface in this mixture. And immediately after you apply the mixture, while it's still wet, we're actually going to create color variation by removing some of the paint. This is just a damp brush. I'm just lightly patting it here and there, making kind of a irregular lightning bolt pattern and letting that lighter underlayer show through a little bit. And this sets your foundation that we will later build on. So once you've got a pattern you like, just set it down, let it dry, and we will move on to the next step. Next, we're going to take the exact same glaze we used before and just create irregular kind of lightning bolt patterns on this surface. I have found that if you are highly caffeinated when you do this, your hands will shake and give you a much more natural jagged pattern. So that's a fun, easy way of getting a natural lightning bolt pattern. Another is to use your non-dominant hand. If you think you can apply the paint sparingly with your non-dominant hand, that is another way to get a really nice, natural, irregular pattern. So just do that here and there across the surface. Next, we're going to be doing some stippling using a small makeup brush. This is an e.l.f. concealer brush. I'll include the link in the video description so you can see exactly what it is. And we're basically going to treat this like a dry brush where we will use Wraithbone. But what we're going to do is just lightly pat the edges. So that'll do like a dry brush highlight. But more importantly, we're going to use stippling to kind of create a better gradient in some of these thicker, darker portions here. So dip your brush in the Wraithbone, get most of it off like you're going to dry brush, and then lightly pat these areas. It's not going to look like much is going on the camera just because it's a subtle color transition, but you're going to essentially use this to both pick out the edges as well as create a little bit more of a gradient between the lighter and darker parts of the marble. And you can use virtually any off-white or ivory with this. I just like Wraithbone because it's somewhat of a grayer ivory. But if you want to keep this very warm, I recommend Screaming Skull. AK Interactive has a paint called Pale Sand that is this very, very beautiful light yellow ivory that looks great on this as well. I just like mine to have a little bit more of a grayish white overtone to it, just to help break up all of that warm color. And here's a good example of me making a correction to my pattern. This part was a little bit too stark for me. As you see that one blotch that's kind of moving upwards, I'm going to get rid of that. So just by doing some very basic stippling, I've corrected the pattern and created much more of a natural gradient that you usually see in marble surfaces. And for our final step, we're going to apply some veins in this marble surface. This is honestly the trickiest part just because it is solely dependent on you being able to make very, very thin lines. So get a brush with a really, really good point that you're comfortable using. This is a Raphael 8404, but use either a fine detail brush or whatever brush that you are comfortable making very thin, jagged lines with. As for the color, in this case I'm using Cygor brown with about 2 drops of Lahmian Medium mixed in, just so it is semi-transparent and flows nicely and easily off of the tip of the brush. But you can really use any kind of dark sienna dark brown that you wish. I just like this because it goes nicely with the reddish brown midtones that we already have here. So as far as where to apply these veins, I generally try and keep to the darker parts of the marble, just because it creates a little too much contrast if I was to put it right in the middle of where the whitest parts are. If you're unsure, you could always look at pictures of marble and tile. Just use some reference photos. Those will definitely help you out. I had a tendency to go overboard if I wasn't looking at a reference photo, so just do this very sparingly. Don't absolutely cover it in these veins. And if you do get one that you don't really like, I'm going to show you how to fix that. So for example, we're going to correct this vein here that I totally did just for learning purposes. And all you're going to do is take your glaze you've been working with this whole time, the Skeleton Horde, Guilliman Flesh, Lahmian mixture, and lightly blot it over top. Next, we're going to do exactly like we did before when we were creating that lighter gradient, except we are going to stipple the hell out of this using Wraithbone. This will essentially erase how dark the line is, and if you notice you're starting to get kind of an obvious white patch, don't freak out. Marbling is all about layers and gradients. Once you have done your stippling and have somewhat of a more obvious white pattern to it, you're going to go right back in with the same glaze you've been working with, and then you're just going to lightly pat it very sparingly over top parts of this white pattern. Don't coat the entire thing, just lightly dab it, just so it's not quite so stark. So that is it. That is the secret to painting marble without an airbrush. It's just glazing and stippling. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you found it exceptionally helpful, please hit that super thanks button. That is essentially a tip jar of which the contributions will go into making more helpful videos. So thanks very much for watching, guys, and until we meet again, happy painting!